Welcome into the Four Verticals podcast here on January 30th, 2025. Just to start out here, of course, how do I say this? Start off the show. Of course, I'm fully aware of what has been happening in Washington over the past 13, 15 hours or so. If you haven't been watching the news, there was a pretty bad plane crash yesterday involving an American Airlines plane that collided with a military helicopter. Both landed into the Potomac River, very similar to a crash in the 80s that involved something similar to that, although the sequence of the events is not exactly the same. But that occurred last night, and I was watching the coverage, as most of you probably were, and keep an eye on that story throughout the day. Just a tragic situation. First major air crash in over 15 years, and that would have been 2009, and the first major incident involving one big three airlines in this country, Delta, United, American, since 2001, when American 587 crashed in Queens, New York, which was about a month or so, 2 months after September 11th. So pretty scary to see that last night. There was no survivors. It's hard to imagine that actually happening. And it's been that long. So keep my thoughts with the folks involved in that, families of the victims. And just figured I'd get my thoughts on that. Very, I can't put into words. It's pretty sad to have that happen last night. And I just want to get my thoughts on that before we start the show. Because we couldn't go through the entire show without mentioning it. So I figured I may as well just go ahead and mention it and get my thoughts on that. So my condolences with the families and the victims, and to all those involved with the crash yesterday evening. Just terrible news. Moving to more of a brighter, happier tone, if you will. Got some news. The ACC ESPN have a new deal. How about that? Could have some ramifications on conference realignment, or maybe not. Got predictions versus the reality. LSU Penn State. Got some Marvel news. Not big news per se, but just some little bit of news. A couple of things I actually want to talk about. And then the Bucs OC search still continues with one name, potentially pulling his name out of it. We'll address all of those in due time. If you are new here, welcome into the stream. If you're listening to this on the podcast feed or replay, this doesn't matter. But we do shows around twice a week normally, Tuesdays and Thursdays, in the afternoon and morning. It just depends how I'm feeling. Talk college football. This show does not take any breaks or long-term breaks whenever we can. It's college football 365 all day, all the time. Got Marvel and Star Wars news peppered in there as well. And some NFL news as well. As a Buccaneers fan, I'll cover the team. Not a full expert. There's some other YouTube channels, sites, reporters I would probably gauge your attention towards more, because they're more in the know than I am on a daily basis. Especially with like not background, but behind the scenes stuff and whatnot. But yeah, that's the show pretty much. So I encourage you who are listening to this on the podcast feed. Should mention we were behind on some episodes. I did fix that a little bit. At least some of the ones that are not lost. I think there's one file that did get lost somehow, but most of the episodes are on Spotify, audio version only, not the YouTube stream. So if you prefer that version, if you're listening to this on the audio version on Spotify, if you haven't followed us there yet, do so. The same with YouTube. If you have not subscribed or followed us on there, subscribed, which is kind of the same thing. Liking the streams and whatnot, go there as well. Do that as well. We highly encourage that. We have 4 subscribers strong. Hopefully we'll get more in the near future. So boilerplate stuff out of the way. Let's actually dive into the show here, y'all. I got a big story here. At least in the college football world. ESPN ACC, how about that? Getting a deal done. I believe the details of the deal run through 2036, I believe. So that's about 10 years or so, 11 years, if you will, of ESPN/ABC coverage of the ACC. Now, of course, ESPN and ABC have a major deal with the SEC, so that means like the 3:30, I believe the 3:30, 8:30 games are only ABC on ABC. SEC games, I believe that's the way it goes. So an ACC game where Big 12 can't have the ABC primetime game, I don't think. 3:30, yes. I don't know about the primetime, but I'm pretty sure the primetime's only SEC home team only specific, I believe. So that's just the way the cookie crumbles of that new rule. New deal that started last year and will be continuing for a long time, probably as long as I'm alive, probably. But highly doubt ESPN would just give that away. But this new deal with ESPN and the ACC is significant for conference realignment. If you've not been following this, I've been following my show. Josh Pate, who'll be on later, I'm sure he'll definitely be talking about this. Cover 3 did a segment on this earlier. This does have implications for conference realignment because the whole story was, the Clemson, Florida State, and Florida State never suing the ACC over their grant rights stuff, and Miami's was tied up in there. North Carolina, I believe, Virginia Tech, like the Magnificent Seven was the term used a couple years ago from Beckman Murphy. A lot of people didn't like that term. I thought it was kind of a cool little reference to a Quentin Tarantino movie, great movie. But those the 7 big boys, if you will, in the ACC were trying to get out because they didn't like the fact that, to sort of explain this in simpler terms why that was happening. It's been a little bit since we talked about this, since at the season and whatnot. The big schools, big boys, the 7 schools I just mentioned, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, Virginia Tech, Virginia, North Carolina, and I think NC State, those are the 7 schools. They feel like, based on the product they give, is not being valued the same way as like the SEC or the Big Ten. They feel you're being left behind, particularly Florida State, Clemson, and Miami probably feel that way because those are the 3 big brands, and they feel like they're being treated lesser based on their prestige and history and inventory they bring in and the money they bring in and the national championships, the history. They felt like they were being valued the same way as those other teams. They feel like those 3 teams felt like they're comparable with teams who are getting big money from the SEC, the SEC and the Big Ten's media deals. That was the whole crux of the argument. And that's why you heard, of course, part of this also gets tied in, Florida State being left out of the playoff a couple years ago. That didn't help. It certainly pissed off a lot of folks in Tallahassee enough to get the ball rolling even more. I know a lot of folks tend to not believe that story. I kind of do. I think that certainly played a role in that, them being left out of the playoff. But they just felt like they weren't getting the same treatment. They felt like they were not being valued the same way as their friends in the SEC. Some teams that they even have to play against on a regular basis, which is, I kind of agree with them. It's not fair. But they ended up, it's a whole story. You can look it up online. I'm not going to waste time talking about it here. But long story short, there's a whole, grant of rights deal. You actually have to go and see the actual document. And Charlotte, you have to, physically fly up there, which is stupid, but whatever. Like the document's not like the Declaration of Independence or anything. It's not some sacred federal document. You have to go and literally go actually see it with your own eyes and put gloves on too and everything. This is weird. But you have that, you have the courts and everything, and it was just a whole legal mess. They have a new deal in place now until 2036. So again, what does this mean for those 3 schools? Well, they're getting somewhat fairly compensated, though I think most of this, to a certain extent, has to deal with, I think this is what Bud Elliott tried to explain on cover 3 earlier, that, and I kind of agree with him, it's the whole idea, it's not just the 4 or the 7 big boys, and then they have the big 3, Miami, Clemson, Florida State. It's the smaller schools, and then the whole, other side of the coin here is what would happen to to schools like, I don't know, Syracuse, Boston College, Wake Forest, SMU, Cal, Stanford, all of the, the great powers over there on the Pacific and Atlantic coastlines. That wouldn't be a problem because those schools don't bring the same value as like a, NC State kind of, but like Clemson, Virginia Tech historically, Florida State historically, Miami historically. They don't have the same oomph as those teams. They don't have the, especially with football being, the biggest, driving force with, revenue, audience eyeballs being drawn on those schools. Again, the historical stuff, inventory as well. Big reason why, because, these networks like ESPN, ABC, ESPN/ABC, Disney, NBC Universal, and Viacom and CBS can tout around the inventory of any conference, really, to a certain extent. Fox as well, 20th Century Fox, or actually technically not anymore, but just the Fox Corporation. Sort of the reason why there was such a big power grab of, the new contracts and everything was to bolster inventory with streaming, and this is back when things like Disney Plus and HBO Max were a new thing, and the whole thing was, inventory for your new streaming sites. And that's why you see games on Peacock, ESPN Plus, and even college football, college basketball too. Even the NFL too, with ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, with the Monday Night Football stuff. That's the reason why these new media deals is like that. It's adding an inventory and more money, especially the bigger brands that would draw in more eyeballs. But the argument always was, and the worry was for people who were wanting college football to stay, regionalized like me, seeing the Pac-12 go into the Atlantic Ocean and just falling off the wayside of the West Coast of the United States. Our worry was that was going to happen to the ACC, and that was going to go away with the dinosaur, disappear forever. Bye. We'll never see you again. And all these teams would move around, and these conferences add and subtract and multiply, and adding in more, 25 more teams or whatever, and just eating up the rest of the ACC. That was my fear. And the fear was, too, what was going to happen to some of these schools, the schools that don't draw in as much revenue and inventory. They're just not the top schools that have a lot of value. Think about this. Does NC State bring a lot of value to any other conference if the ACC were to fold? Not really. Wake Forest? No. Syracuse? No. Boston College? No offense to those schools. I'm sure they've had their moments. Boston College had Matt Ryan for a couple years and a couple 10-win seasons back in 07 and 08, 09. It was great, but they haven't, Doug Flutie, but they haven't had sustainable success. Now, the flip side of that, of course, had the basketball side of things, of Syracuse historically, NC State at times, Wake Forest historically. Then you have, of course, Clemson. Actually, no, not really. Clemson more of late. The Florida State historically. Of course, you have Notre Dame is a whole different thing with them being part of the ACC for basketball. But that was always the argument, is what happens to these little schools that don't have the same, star power, next to them as some of these other schools. The big three, if you were, the big seven, or magnificent seven. They just don't. Wake Forest doesn't have the same value, at least to me, if looking at this from a business, putting your business hat on, the same value as a team with an SEC sticker, or a team with Big Ten sticker, or just those teams and at least teams in value, or teams in terms of history. But they're kind of similar, though. There are some similar examples. I think Bud brought up this example on Cover 3 earlier about how, really think about it, even some of these lower tier SEC teams are actually more similar in value to some of these other ACC teams. For example, I think the one he used was Auburn. And he's not wrong. Auburn, yeah, sure, they have the right sticker on their helmet. Great. If you really peel off the sticker and take off, the fixtures, and you strip it down, using this as a house metaphor here, just to be clear, it's kind of no different than a ACC team like NC State or Pitt. Kind of similar, right? Auburn is kind of, at least in terms of recent years, I grant you it's a little bit different with their conference schedule being released in the last 5 years. Your schedule in the past was the hardest in the country. But if you really take away that championship with Cam and company in 2010, they're kind of in the same realm as a Pitt, whatever, in terms of value. Now, historically, obviously Auburn's much more better than Pitt in those schools. But in terms of value, if you look at this from a business perspective, I don't know if they're not much different. Again, from that perspective only. If you look at it from just a general college football fan and entire broad spoke of history, tradition, yeah, Auburn's a lot better than Pitt, a lot better than Wake Forest, a lot better than NC State. But the 8th team in the SEC or the 8th team in the Big Ten is not really that different from the 4th team in the ACC or the 5th team in the ACC. So I think that's another argument you can look at. But at least the bottom line is here, I say all that to say, I am glad this deal is done. I'm very much so glad. I would much rather see a deal get done with the ACC and the ESPN than to have the ACC go the same way as the Pac-12. I don't have much joy in seeing that. I was very upset when the news came a couple of years ago when Washington, Oregon, albeit that was leaked a long time ago, and I think you could sort of see how the sort of conveyor belt of evidence I was pointing towards that when it was officially announced. You have the Arizona schools, the Four Corner schools are leaving and going to the Big 12. It just kind of feels sad. Because I like college football like it used to be. For example, anytime I do a new college football dynasty and CFP 25, I always, at some point now in the first year, I don't do this. Second year, I always do. Bring back the Pac-12. because I just liked, and also taking away, and well, that means like taking away like teams from the ACC don't belong there. Frankly, from a geography standpoint, I always bring it back to Pac-12 because I'm just used to that, and I think it's that structure just kind of fit the sport a little bit better. It made it more somewhat regionalized, but also made it national because there's more conferences, and having more expand these conferences just makes it worse because now you have more teams to keep an eye on, and all these the two Super D conferences. There's I don't know. I just maybe some of it's nostalgia based, but just from not having the sport be so much so controlled by corporate people and maybe people who don't have this interest for us, college football sickos or just sicko fans in general. I'm glad the ACC is sticking around. Now, does it necessarily mean conference realignment's done? No, I think there's certainly more coming. This doesn't, necessarily put a guardrail over it. Now, it does sort of temporarily have a quick fix to it, but it doesn't mean in a couple of years we start to hear rumblings, after 2036, that's when things really get interesting. After things really begin to, maybe some signals starts to come out that, hey, this, once this ever expires with ESPN, Florida State could potentially be on the move in Clemson. So it doesn't necessarily stopping that. I think what Bud Elliott said earlier, I agree with. It kind of depends on which school you are. If you're a school like Boston College, Wake Forest, Cal, Stanford, SMU, you're happy because the conference is still around. You have that sticker on your helmet and have the logo pin on your field, and you can say, "Hey, we are in a Power 4 conference. Congratulations! I got water from my fridge today." And if you're a team like or a program or like Clemson, Virginia Tech, Miami, well, you don't feel good about it because, again, you still kind of feel like you're in a lesser conference, and frankly, a commissioner that doesn't take football that seriously. Nothing against Jim Phillips, so that's call it spade a spade. I just don't think I don't think he feels like someone who is serious about making the ACC that competitive. I'm sorry, that's the vibe I'm getting. I don't like it. It's just weird. Not to mention him and Boo Corrigan, who was the athletic director of NC State a couple years ago, and Florida State got left out of the playoff. Couldn't even advocate for Florida State. Boo Corrigan looked like he had googly eyes on the stupid ESPN show. You have Jim Phillips, and he didn't try to defend Florida State at all, really. It's just kind of whatever. Put up a statement, cool. You could have done what Greg Sankey did on College Game Day and did the whole, this thing's not the other or whatever he said. Like, whatever. It's weird in general, but I'm glad it's still around. Is it a clear, definitive answer? Does it give me confidence that, conference realignment is done? Is it done so? No, I think it's still a thing, and it will continue to be a thing. Though it won't be like happening tomorrow, but I do think in the future we will have more movement. Although it won't be the seismic, earth-shattering movement, but who knows? Maybe we're wrong on that. But I will say, what this also helps out, not just speaking of Notre Dame earlier, in terms of football, this really does help Notre Dame because they're locked in the ACC now. I think this does impact their TV deal. Well, at least not their TV deal, but their deal with the ACC because they are an unofficial member in college football because they do play. They're required to play 5 teams in the ACC realm, and at least in that part of the world. And that includes Stanford now, so that's one of them. So they have that. So they're happy. I'm pretty sure those folks over there in South Bend would much rather not have to play team from the Big Ten or a team from the SEC, I'm sure. But so I'm sure they're happy. ACC's happy. I'm sure Florida State and those teams are happy to at least have another team that actually takes football seriously, that actually they actually care about it versus like a Wake Forest, Boston College, Cal, and Stanford. Again, nothing wrong with those programs. I think I agree with all of our folks that I don't think they have the same emphasis on sports as Notre Dame does. And I think Notre Dame helps the conference and it props it up a little bit because then you get more eyeballs and you get the exposure on NBC when it's a home game for Notre Dame, and it feels a lot better. And I think a lot of folks in South Bend, especially folks who are in like Coral Gables, Clemson, South Carolina, and Tallahassee, and Blacksburg, they're happy. Certainly happy. Now, if you're in these other schools like Georgia Tech, Duke, North Carolina, I'm sure you're probably not happy that you're going to have another, at least in most years, another tough game. But at least it helps, right? Got the sticker on your helmet. That matters, right? ACC, woo! You guys don't take football as much seriously as other schools do, but whatever. It's at least as the conference is still around, I'm happy. But you also have to acknowledge, the conference is not totally that serious about football. But hey, at least they're serious enough to get a new deal. So there's that. How about that, right? And that is enough of the ACC New Deal talk. Of course, who wants to talk more about corporate control and everything? That literally took like almost 17 minutes. Didn't expect that to happen, but whatever. And then some water real quick here. I got predictions versus reality. Got Marvel news, and then the show with Tampa Bay Buccaneers OC search, at least a little mini update, if you will. And then we'll probably have more of a shorter show today. Oh, by the way, too, I think some people forget, I believe that next Wednesday is the last day of the signing. Well, the second signing day. It used to be the only signing day, but now it's second, which is kind of strange that now it's kind of defunct now. Frankly, they could really just get rid of it. I don't think anyone cares anymore, but that is next Wednesday, so just will officially, quote unquote, officially end the signing period, even though it's kind of whatever now. Doesn't matter anymore. Kind of disappointing, but get some water real quick, and then we'll carry on with the show. Nothing like having a little bottle of water with you when you're doing long form shows. I've said that before. If you're into podcasting, water's your friend. Make sure the voice is parched there a little bit. Actually, I should probably make sure you guys can hear me. I didn't do that yet. I was going to at least make sure the stream's actually working. So if you hear a little feedback, that is why. Okay, it is working. That's fantastic. So, predictions versus reality. A little segment we started last week. It's going full steam ahead, if you will. So, let's break this down a little bit. So, we did Oregon, Kansas State, Tennessee, Michigan. Mixed bag. Got some right, some wrong. Now we have the fun part. Excuse me, a little burp there. LSU, Penn State. I guess we'll do the easy one first. That's LSU, or I guess somewhat easier, but still somewhat some things I also have to say here. LSU, we predicted back in the summer that their best case, based on their schedule, and we looked at different things, returning production, things like that for the preview. Best case scenario, we had 10-2. Thought that was pretty reasonable, or at least reasonable best case scenario. Worst case was 7-5. Back to that in just a second. The reasonable prediction that we went with, sort of our final middle ground, was 9-3. They won the 9 games, but that came with the bowl win. So technically they went 8-4. So more towards the worst case than the best case, if you will. They had still issues defensively. They got better with Blake Baker. Kevin Peoples, by the way, someone who Josh Pate was kind of assessed with last hiring cycle, which, I mean, who can blame him? He's a really good defensive line coach. Don't believe me, go watch some of the Missouri teams a couple years ago, last year, and then see this year's teams. Kevin Peoples is there. Blake Baker, big overhaul. I think Bo Davis is there too, if I believe. Bo Davis, who was at Texas and Bama before. Now he's at LSU. So the staff got better. The quality of the defense didn't get that much better. It improved a little bit. There's some performances that were better than others. But, of course, I think the stance was you weren't going to see the results that quickly. I think this year is where you really need to see, at least to believe those results will come, which I think they will. Of course, we have long time between now and when they play Clemson at the other Death Valley, the Clemson Death Valley, week 1. By the way, it's just an insane game. That might be the game of the weekend. Very excited to see how that plays out. Very interesting matchup, too, and a matchup that we don't really see that much. And the last time they played was 2013, I believe, in the Peach Bowl or the old Chick-fil-A Bowl before it was part of the big bowl games and the playoff now. So, I mean, it started out pretty good, right? That one loss to USC, okay, reasonable. Another week 1 loss to Brian Kelly, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to get mad here. Other folks did. I'm calling for Brian Kelly's job, though. Like I say, I have this policy, and I've repeated here again because I think some folks forget this and tend to not do this. Even then, I said this repeated then. Brian Kelly's not on the hot seat. Just get it out of the way. He's not on the hot seat. He's not getting fired. He's not getting fired next year either. He's completely fine. If there's a scandal or something like that, or if they go 2-10, then that's a different conversation. But more likely he's not getting fired. I don't sit here my stance on coaching firings and stuff, unfortunately bringing this up on them, but unfortunately in the sort of climate we live in these days, especially in the sports talk, I have to do this. Whenever it comes to coaching situations, both Brian Kelly and James Franklin, I knew this was going to happen when I was talking about both of these teams. Ironically, they're both in today's show. I'm not going to sit here and yell, scream, or call people names or calling people getting fired whenever we're talking about head coaches. I don't ever do that. I never advocate for any of that. I don't like when I hear other people do it. I think me and Josh Peter kind of similar in that. I just don't do it. I don't sit here and like yell, scream, calling people names, saying this person needs to be fired, or he's an idiot, or he's stupid, or whatever. I didn't do that for Ryan Day. I didn't do it for James Franklin. Surely didn't do it for Brian Kelly. Though other folks in the sports talk world do that. You know who they are. Frankly, if I disagree with their style, but most of those who are the quote-unquote experts of college football, do they actually watch NFL more than college football. They won't tell you that. But let's be real, they watch the NFL and the NBA more, and they have that mindset, and they view it through the NBA NFL lens, and they just assume, oh, yeah, coach loses a game in week 1, just fire them. Oh, I'll get rid of him. Mike Norvell, I'll get rid of him. Send him to Gitmo. Whatever. It just frustrates me, and I'm getting mad. But, and I just said I don't get mad, but I am frustrated when people do that, and it really kind of just pisses me off. At least internally, behind the scenes it does, and when I'm doing the show usually. But like I said, I don't sit here, yell, scream, and call people's jobs, or call people idiots, or names, or whatever. I don't do that. Don't do it for Brian Kelly. Don't do it for James Franklin. Don't do it for anyone. So I'm not doing it for Brian Kelly here. This year is what it is. Did you see some improvement? Yeah, at times. I think there was some defensive improvement. I think it's interesting how when you played Ole Miss this time around, without Jane Daniels, and you won the game, which is good, but more importantly, you only gave up 26 points doing it. Now, granted, it's a bit different. You're off a bye. Ole Miss was not. So the whole bye advantage, I know Josh Pate was talking about that. And Ozzy, even this time last year, when you pointed it out, which kudos to him for doing that, because he was using his, of course, we all know Josh Pate's Doctor Strange, right? As if, he can see the future. But, so you won that game. That's good. Now there's some bad games. Florida, Alabama, Texas A&M, dynamics-wise, not the best. And they ended the year pretty strongly, very strongly defensively. Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, not the worst teams in the world, but certainly fairly decent teams. Vanderbilt last year was pretty good. Baylor, you gave up 31 points, but whatever. It's you won the game, so it's not like we're going to sit here and throw a fit over it. But there is still room for improvement. With Blake Baker, Kevin Peoples, Bo Davis, Garrett Nussmeyer's coming back next year. I think they could be a pretty good team next year. Again, you look at their schedule, copy-paste what they had last year, so they go back to LSU. LSU goes back to Ole Miss. Carolina comes to your place at Vanderbilt, A&M at home, Bama on the road, Arkansas, then Oklahoma, Norman in the year. Then, like I mentioned earlier, you get Clemson. It's a tough schedule, but I think it's not one that's not manageable. You could manage it. Again, if everything comes together, if you have, Garrett Nussmeier plays well, the offense, you sort of find your new receivers. You lost some more guys this year. I'm sure you'll find more. Defensively, got to make sure you limit more of the big plays and emphasis on that, and more an emphasis on strength and conditioning, nutrition, all the things you don't really consider, especially like a program that LSU you think they're given, which they are given, at least you think like that, but not all times they aren't. And I think this new staff there, but again, guys like Kevin Peoples, Blake Baker, Bo Davis, those guys are serious about it. I mean, go watch Bo Davis's rant after Texas lost to Iowa State, Sark's first year there. And don't tell me he doesn't care. He does care. I know for sure he does care. He's not from the program, but based on what I've seen, he cares. I care. I certainly would if I was a coach, but I think they get some stuff right, go through spring practice, emphasizing more of the physicality and being able to get the quarterback and limit big plays, and also more consistency on offense. Maybe running the ball a little bit more better would help. Establishing that more, getting Garrett more comfortable, improving the offensive line. They should be a really decent team next year. And I agree with Josh Pitt. They could be a team that may be a playoff team, at least a team that you would think of one as that. I don't really like saying that, especially before the season starts, especially let alone before November. But they could. There certainly could be a team that I think a lot of folks are overlooking as a team with a lot of talent on there. And Garen Nussmeier, by the way, and according to some of the sites I was looking at the past couple weeks, he's up there in those Heisman odds. I mean, Bud Elliott wasn't stupid for picking him to win it last year. Now, granted, it was a long shot thing, and it didn't necessarily work out. But the talent's there. Garrett could have very, very easily went to the NFL, and they could have been really screwed because they lost Underwood to Michigan. But he's back this year, and obviously they'll have to figure it out at quarterback after this year, whether it's transfer or not. But I think LSU, yes, it was sloppy last year at times. But yes, it did lean towards the worst case scenario. But I think next year, coming off of what you did last year, building off some stuff, defense got a little bit better. You weren't giving up like 30 points per game, so that's a start. But you have to see more improvement, I think, and it's reasonable to expect that, especially with the second-year staff and with a lot of pressure on Brian Kelly. Look, I'm not saying there is no pressure. I'm not saying there shouldn't be expectations, but I just don't know why people would just believe, expectations, got to fire someone if you lose one game. It's like, well, hold on just a minute. Like, in the NBA, it might be true. In the NFL, it might be true. In college football, check notes, I have never seen a coach get fired after losing one game next year. So what's up? Brian Kelly loses to Clemson next year. He's automatically, after the game, sorry, coach, we're sending you to Gimbo. Sorry, bye, have fun. Like, geez, like cruelness. And the same people, too, wanted the expanded playoff. And, well, you can't let teams turn it around in the middle of the year, but nope, sorry, gotta fire you. Bye. Okay. Same with Ryan Day too. If he wins, you lose to Texas next year. I think it's week 1 as well. Bye. Have fun. Sorry, we're firing you. Like, wow, that's whatever. And then I know, people, push back on that. Say, well, your normal job, you would know when be the case. Well, college football is not a normal job. It's a little bit different. Yeah, but they're in certain circumstances, and I just think some folks need to just calm down a little bit. Like, geez, turn down the temperature a little bit. Especially this next guy, James Franklin and Company. We smartly, if you will, in the summer, best case scenario 11-1. Seem reasonable, right? Worst case scenario 8-4, based on schedule. The reasonable sort of final prediction we have for Penn State was 10-2. They kind of went that way, didn't they? They went 10-2, or at least they went 2 losses. But as it were to turn out, they actually went 11-1. So actually, we did that kind of right. So we were definitely on track at Penn State. We definitely got the best case scenario was indeed what they ended up doing. So if you do even if it was 10-2, still we would have hit. But again, going back to the whole hot seat stuff. So with Penn State and James Franklin, so you're saying that 11-1, and I projected this, by the way. If you can go look at my notes and go look at past episodes on Spotify. We weren't on YouTube back then, but we were on Spotify. Have it on authority. But go look at that episode. I have the documents here. We picked them to go 11-1 as the best case scenario. That's what everyone probably picked them to do. 11-1, 10-2, 8-4 being the worst case. So you're telling me that Penn State losing in the semifinals and making it all the way to the Big Ten championship game, lost to Oregon, close game, they were competitive, and then get blown out by some people thought. NFL types again, getting it wrong. You don't understand that college ball is a little bit different than the NFL. Then get to the playoffs. Penn State wins the games. I know everyone makes the whole thing for, they're supposed to win those games. Like, what? So now we're even devaluing less than the playoff now? Like, oh, great, we're moving the goalpost. Then they lose the close game to Notre Dame. Great season, just great season. They even said it as much afterwards. It's like they did a really good job this year. They made it to the playoff. They would have been in the past years, but now since it expanded, you gave those teams like that more access. And now what? You're disappointed to have more access now? Like, I don't know what you want them to do. So them going 11-1, me projecting that as not being overrated. It's not blowing James Franklin out of expectations or making him some like god or whatever college football. He's not that. He's not some god like Nick Saban was. He's not that. 11-1 for Penn State this year is what I projected them to go. 10-2, best case scenario. 8-4, worst case scenario. Anywhere in that realm, that's about what I expected. 11-1, best case scenario. 10-2, most reasonable. I was actually off a little bit, so our best case scenario actually hit more than our most reasonable one. So anyone calling James Franklin overrated, I think he's underrated. I'm still running from Nick right here. He's actually properly rated. Was properly rated head coach of college football. I know folks will NFL types will smash me on that. A lot of you guys will call me an idiot and stupid or being a James Franklin homer. But I don't care. James Franklin's not a friend of the program. I don't have his cell phone number. I don't have his email or whatever. I don't talk to him every single day. I don't have the same access as like a Josh Pater and these other reporters. I don't have that. He's not a friend of the program. He's not. I don't get checks from State College, Pennsylvania to spew Penn State propaganda. I don't do that. I have my own. I do my show with my laptop and my iPad with my notes here. I just don't understand what the whole accusations of me being a Penn State homer. And look, do I support them? Do I want to be good? Yeah, I do. I mean, I feel like Penn State's one of those programs over the past 10, 15 years, especially after what happened with the whole sex abuse scandal, that I've always wondered if they hired the right coach, sort of clean out the grooseness of whatever that scandal was, that he could rebound. Sort of what Baylor did. Baylor with Dave Aranda, who quietly had a good year last year, and before that, Matt Rule, kind of brought that place back to some stability. Same with James Franklin, got that thing stable after a couple years of the Bill O'Brien experiment. Well, you can't deny that's pretty good. You can't deny that James Franklin deserves to have a statue built at Vanderbilt's campus after what he did there. 2 9-win seasons and 2 top 25 finishes. No other head coach in Vanderbilt history has ever done that. Only other coach that got them to top 25 was Karkley and general manager Barton Simmons. That's it. Nobody else besides James Franklin has ever done that, at least in 2 years. So if it sounds like I'm defending some of these guys, like Brian Kelly and James Franklin, that's because from all the shows I listen to, all of the content I've, a lot of these shows like Cover 3, Josh Pate, J.D. Piquel, name all of them. Next Round Live, I understand that these guys are human. These guys know there's a lot of pressure, competitive pressure. And when these guys get fired, yes, you can say, oh, that doesn't suck for them. They're making tons of money. Well, they're not doing what they're doing. It's like, okay, so you're getting fired from what you're – it's hard to explain. If you don't watch those shows as religiously as I do, you won't get it. If you only watch like these shows like, I don't know, Undisputed, First Things First, or, well, Undisputed used to be that, but First Things First, First Take, Colin Cowherd. You don't get that. Now, Colin, maybe when Joel Klatt's on there, and I like Joel Klatt, but you don't get that inventory. You don't get that peek behind the curtain. You just get hot takes, screaming, yelling, fire this person, or screw this person. This person's an idiot. That's not our show. That's not those shows. It's not shows that focus fully on college football. If you want your NFL or NBA takes, go to those shows. I fully salute them. There's a reason why those shows are successful. My show doesn't do that. We cover college football. We peel the curtain behind the scenes. I do. That's why I listen to those shows. That's why I engage in those shows. That those shows are geared towards me as a college football fan, giving me access that the shows like First Things First or First Take or Colin Cowherd and those big, some of those shows are kind of stupid. Let's be real. Some of the national shows don't give you. They don't give you that access. They just fly by NFL type saying, "Oh, yeah, there's college football, stupid college football, whatever." It's almost like look down at us like we're puny, but we're not. One of the best sports of all sports. I don't care what anyone says. How, of course, you mean the argument for how the postseason is structured, and yeah, I agree. The NFL is a lot better, but college football is still college football. It's a great sport, and I don't know. It just makes me upset when some of these NFL type shows and these national type shows, and when they cover college football, they don't understand. They don't get it. I think that's represented too with guys like Brian Kelly and James Franklin. They're sort of the manifestation of this sort of weird, condescending, man, if things don't go wrong, it's totally wrong. You have to start over and blow the whole thing up. And then you're rooting for no stability. You're rooting for people to lose their jobs and rooting for people to have their lives completely changed, even though they're not doing anything like nefarious or whatever. I get there's expectations, but you also have to balance the fact that these people are human. So whatever. I know then people will come back to me and then say, oh, it's you're handling guys with kid gloves or not. I'm being reasonable. I'm whatever. I can say that and people can just choose and not listen, and that's fine with me because it's not my cup of tea. And then that whole segment, by the way, just turned into a whole rant, which doesn't normally happen, but it kind of had to happen. Also fills some of the dead air as well. So yeah, predictions versus reality turned into more of a rant about the national media, but at least the national sports realm. And look, I don't care if those people get mad at me. It's my opinion. They have their opinions too, but we can agree to disagree. I disagree with their opinions, and they may disagree with my opinions, so it's fine. That's the way, the words of Monster Cronkite. That's the way it is. So we get some more water here. Got some Marvel nuggets to talk about. Then we'll have the Bucs OC search, and then we'll wrap up the show. So we got some Marvel news to talk about. Usually kind of beer towards the end of the show here. So we got our yesterday. Of course, everyone knows that Captain America: Brave New World's coming out. Touched on the comments that Anthony Mackie made on Tuesday, and he did what I thought he should have done. What I would expect is have a little statement, not apologizing for it, but clarifying it. Which, by the way, golf clap for Anthony Mackie. Good move for him. Again, I felt like his comments were taken out of context anyway, and I've already explained my thoughts on that and how Disney's PR department, in general, not just specific studios like Marvel and Star Wars, but Disney's PR people in general have been horrible the past couple years, and that was a W. So give credit where credit is due there. I know a lot of folks won't understand it. A lot of folks still hate him for saying that, particularly some folks on certain aisles of the political spectrum, but we're not a political show. If you want coverage of that, go to like CNN or NBC or Fox or whatever pundit you follow. So that happened. Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man came out. A lot of concern, by the way, when that show was coming out. I haven't watched it yet because I've been really busy with a lot of things going on. Of course, yesterday with the plane crash, I was actually going to check on it, or at least watch the first episode, but then the plane crash happened, and I kind of stole the attention. But some good stuff coming out. I watched Josh Dinnerbergs did his review yesterday. The show sounds like it's really great, which is a surprise after the concern that was coming out, and a lot of folks weren't happy about the animation style and some of the choices they were making. But turns out sneakily good. So that's a W. Also, what came out, I believe yesterday, was our first look of Tim Blake Nelson as the leader. Grant you, it was cleverly hidden, by the way. Which even leads more credence to maybe some concern, or maybe Marvel was actually seriously trying to hide it, not just to create suspense, but more some issues, because didn't look necessarily that great. I'm going to be honest, and I grant you, it's a very small clip. Yes, it's purposely darkened. It's definitely edited down, but from what I can tell, it just kind of looks weird. It looks like Doctor Doom from like the 2015 Fantastic Four movie, which, by the way, horrible movie. I think I did see it somewhere. I don't know where, but especially from what I've heard too, it's a horrible movie. Kind of looks like him a little bit, which is not what the leader looks like in the comics. So hopefully, again, maybe Marvel was hiding it just a little bit because it's not finished yet. But the movie's coming out in 2 weeks or so. So yeah, hopefully it looks a lot better than that. So that came out. A lot of folks were happy about that. Granted, not the same level of controversy as the whole James Gunn Superman stuff. I was going to talk about it today, actually, but decided not to. Maybe that'll be next week. Save that for a different day. So that came out. I'll also wrap up the Marvel segment here. Benedict Cumberbatch re-clarified his statements about Doctor Strange, and I mentioned this, I believe, last week when the news came out, that there was a chance that he may have been lying a little bit, maybe playing coy a little bit. Turns out he was, and interesting. Grant you, again, we saw this again with Andrew Garfield and the whole I'm not the werewolf or whatever. Clearly, some of the stuff that was leaking out from Spider-Man No Way Home kind of dictated that he was in the movie, and it whatever. So, look, it's some of these actors. I mean, it's like they're lying for a good reason. They're lying because they don't want to get in trouble. It's sort of a good lie, if you will. But that happened, so some clarification there, I guess. But then again, we could turn around, he's not in the movie, so it's like people say things. It's kind of like me getting water or me getting up from bed. Like mostly everyone can do that. So Marvel news, a little segment there out of the way. Buccaneers OC search update. No real big developments just yet. Some names have been interviewing. Some analysts have been interviewed. Cliff Kingsbury, by the way, a guy who was sort of my pipe dream as a coordinator, Looks like he's staying in Washington, so he took his name out of the Saints job. Buccaneers, things off the table, which to me disappointed him, but I get it. Him and Jaden have a good thing going on there with him and Dan Quinn. Again, I told you guys that was going to be a dangerous team. They didn't have all the pieces they need to be successful, but here they are. They made a really deep playoff run in year one. But we're not a Buccaneer. We are not a Washington show, but we are a Buccaneer show. So Cliff Kingsbury, pipe dream, a candidate off the board. Chip Kelly, we'll see. Some other guys, the analyst from the Rams, who's a Sean McVay, Liam Cohen disciple, very much still in play here. Kellen Moore, probably not in play. It looks like him and the Saints are probably going to be a thing. Him being hired there, so because Mike McCarthy is waiting until next year, so he's not going to be available. So looks like either some version of like a Chip Kelly analyst route, even promoting from event. I think there's some interviews there. So I thought, and I said this privately too, I don't think I said this on Tuesday, I may have said this on Tuesday, that I think we may get some resolution by this week. I don't think so. They may have to move that to within at some point, hopefully soon before the Super Bowl. I think we'll get a resolution. But if indeed there is talk going on between these teams and that are involved in some analysts or whatnot, then maybe that's potentially why it's being slowed down, but there's no indication of that. So hopefully by the time tomorrow ends, hopefully before the Super Bowl, the Buccaneers will have a OC. Not AOC, a politician, a offensive coordinator, more specific here. A offensive coordinator replacement for Liam Cohen, hopefully. I thought by the time this week was over, clearly not. Before the Super Bowl, probably more likely, unless they're waiting for Chip Kelly, which is if that is the case, then maybe they're waiting after signing day, and maybe there'll be some moves there. I know the guys on Curve 3 mentioned that as well, that traditionally, yes, there is usually movement after signing day, at least the second one now was the original one, that there is some assistant coach movement going back and forth. So, yeah, I think we'll get some resolution here soon. So, we'll see. And that's the show. We've been going for today. 47 minutes. So, a bit of a shorter show, but around the lesser length here, but medium size, if you will. We'll be back on Tuesday. If there's any Buccaneers OC moves being made, I'll do an emergency podcast, but more than likely, I don't think we're going to. So just stay tuned for that. If any other news happens, of course, we'll do a little video here on the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, please make sure you do this. Subscribe to the podcast feed, YouTube channel. Like the stream. Follow me on Twitter at @WorkBirds_pod on Twitter. You guys been in the show here. Thoughts and prayers again. I uplift the victims of the American Airlines crash yesterday or last night. Just bad. I was watching. I guess as we're having some dead air here, it's finished. I was watching the news last night. Just tough to watch me. I can't believe that's been that long since a major airline air carrier was involved in a crash, which was again 2001, a couple weeks after the events at the Trade Center in the Pentagon on September 11th with American 587. Just hard to imagine, man. Just hard to imagine that actually happening. Again, the investigation's going on. Again, my thoughts are with the families and all those involved. From either Washington locally or wherever you're from. There's some Russians involved too, because some of them were, a lot of the passengers were coming from Wichita, was hosting a Olympic skating convention or whatever. Those ice skaters you see like in Winter Olympics. All those folks did not make it. There's no survivors, and that's sad, troubling, because the event I mentioned earlier, the accident back in January, actually ironically same month, and the anniversary actually passed recently of the Air Florida Flight 90, I believe, and that's what it was. It was an Air Florida 737. I think it was a de-icing issue. They de-iced the plane, but then I don't know why I'm talking about air accidents, but it's not that podcast, but a little bit different than that incident, because there were survivors for that crash back in the 80s. None today, unfortunately, or yesterday, and all those involved on the American Airlines regional jet, the CRJ 700, I believe, a plane I've actually flown on before, and the military helicopter. So everyone did not make it, and that's disappointing. Very depressing to hear that, and hopefully the investigation is done correctly. And they'll be, again, the NTSB and them, those guys are smart. They'll be on this, naming on it since last night. And it's tough. Really is tough seeing those images last night and hearing about it too. And I was, by the way, what I was doing last night, I was playing College Ball 25, and I was checking Twitter just because of the Buccaneers OC search. I was wondering if there's any movements, and then there it was, the trending on Twitter, and I was like, wow, that happened. And I started watching the news, and I was like, wow, here I was watching the first major aviation accident in 15 plus years. So that's very sad to hear that, and my thoughts go with the families and victims of the people involved. And hopefully the investigation will be done properly. I think it will be. And NTSB is pretty smart. Those guys they're experts. Been doing it. Some of those guys have been doing it for well before I was born. So they'll have this covered. And just a very depressing situation last night. Very, very tragic. So, and then the show there, and never acknowledged on the events that happened last night. So until Tuesday, enjoy the rest of your week. Take care, and then we'll see you guys next Tuesday for, I believe, episode 69. How about that? It'll be episode 70. So 30 episodes away from the coveted 100 episode number, which means if this was TV show, we'll get to the syndication mark. So anyway, guys, take care. See you guys on Tuesday.